All right. Hello. It is so nice to be here with you all tonight. So, this is the second in our weight management lecture series for breast cancer survivors. So, tonight we are going to talk about the role of nutrition in weight management for breast cancer survivors. So, if this is your first time joining us for this series, welcome. If you were here for our first installation last month, it's really nice to see you again. Um, Little about me, if we don't already know each other, I'm Jess Cording. I'm a registered dietitian, health coach, author. I also happen to be a certified Pilates mat instructor and a Reiki practitioner. And at the Valley Center, I work with our breast cancer survivorship patients as well as those in our high risk clinic to help with risk reduction and improving quality of life through diet, exercise, and other healthy lifestyle habits. We started this series because we get so many questions from our patients about weight management, and we wanted to provide some resources. I really strongly believe that it's important to take a comprehensive approach that incorporates mindset, nutrition, movement, hormonal considerations, sleep, stress management, and mental well-being. They're all part of the big picture. So, this is the second in our 8-part series. So, today, while we'll mostly be talking about avoiding unintentional weight gain in breast cancer survivors, this presentation is meant to be inclusive for all breast cancer survivors and for those looking to reduce their risk. So, we're going to touch base about nutrition for cancer risk reduction in general. We will talk about weight management nutrition for breast cancer survivors. We'll talk about key nutrients for weight management. And we'll get into some creating healthy meals and snacks, fostering a healthy mindset and healthy relationship with food. And we'll touch base as well about how a dietitian can help. Okay, so this drives me crazy. For so long, women have been told that in order to lose weight and or maintain a healthy weight, they need to just eat less and move more. You probably don't need me to tell you that that doesn't always work, especially when someone has been through breast cancer treatment. Something else to keep in mind is that menopause, whether it's related to treatment or not, also impacts metabolism and nutrient needs. And it's really important that we take this into consideration when coming up with a weight management approach. We also get so many mixed messages about nutrition from social media, from our loved ones. We all know that person who loves to give advice, right? Even from our healthcare providers. The things that my patients tell me their doctors, maybe not at Valley, but their doctors elsewhere have told them about nutrition and weight loss and weight management is just ridiculous. Also, it can be hard to tell what's credible and what's not. And even when that information is credible or from a credible source, it can be really hard to know which of that information to actually apply to your own life. So, here's some important factors to keep in mind when we're talking about weight management for breast cancer survivors. Because, like I said, it's not just eat less, move more. We need to take into account metabolic changes related to treatment, such as changes in hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, insulin resistance, inflammation, decreased physical activity, and muscle loss, also called sarcopenia. And then hormone changes. So this is very commonly related to treatment. So, for example, if someone is experiencing medically induced menopause or surgically induced menopause, and or they use an aromatase inhibitor or experience menstrual cycle changes related to tamoxifen use, those are all things that can impact weight management efforts. We also need to take into account medication side effects such as fatigue, sleep disturbance, joint pain, mood changes, that all of that can impact weight management efforts. And then mental health concerns. This one does not get nearly enough airtime. We're going to do an entire installation of this series on mental health and stress management, especially. But stress and trauma can play a huge role in well-being. And especially when we're talking about weight management, if somebody can be eating well, exercising consistently, but if their stress is not managed or they're dealing with some unresolved trauma, that's going to impact their health. So this is a quick recap from what we talked about last time, but in case that this is your first time joining us, some of the metabolic changes I'm talking about related to breast cancer medications and chemotherapy are things such as changes in glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. So this we see commonly with use of aromatase inhibitors and or chemotherapy. Certain chemotherapies, which have been linked to increased blood sugar levels and decreased insulin sensitivity. So we're looking at issues with blood sugar balance. Changes in lipid metabolism. So what I mean by that, someone might notice that suddenly they have higher cholesterol levels on their blood work or high triglycerides. Um, it's also thought that this increase might be related to changes in glucose metabolism because they are connected. So people will often see these changes go hand in hand. And then changes in leptin levels. So leptin is a hormone produced in the fat tissue that is positively correlated with body fat mass. So what that means is that the more body fat that somebody has, the higher their leptin levels. And that can lead to what's called leptin resistance over time. And that has an impact on weight management efforts because leptin helps us regulate hunger hormones, or excuse me, hunger levels. And that is really important for supporting maintenance of weight on a long-term basis. When the body is functioning properly, that leptin helps suppress the appetite until, someone is at the appropriate weight. But if leptin resistance is in the mix, somebody might feel hungry even after eating, or they might find that they eat more even though their body has enough fat stores for survival. And there are a number of things that can influence leptin and leptin resistance. So, for example, some studies have linked use of tamoxifen, raloxifene, and or aromatase inhibitors to higher leptin levels. So that's just something to keep in mind. Sometimes people, I've heard my patients feel like they will tell me that they feel like their healthcare provider made them feel like it was their fault that they were like having troubles with weight management. And they're like, I don't understand what, it's not my fault. Like I'm hungry, or, these are these changes I'm noticing on my blood work and I haven't done anything different. It's not in your head. You're not crazy. You're not doing things wrong necessarily. It's that sometimes there are these changes that occur that we need to shift our habits to account for. Now, my patients will probably tell you I talk a lot about muscle and metabolism. And this is important because muscle weighs more than fat, but it's more metabolically active, meaning that the more muscle somebody has, the higher their metabolism will be. And muscle loss has been associated with decreased insulin sensitivity, changes in blood sugar regulation, changes in cholesterol levels, fatty liver, chronic inflammation. So, as someone loses muscle as a result of treatment or the hormonal shifts that are related to the aging process, decreased physical activity, this can have metabolic consequences as well. And as I mentioned, that muscle mass does also decline with age. So, okay, so what do we do about that, right? Like we want to protect that muscle. So, strength training and consuming adequate protein, which I will talk about with you today, are two really great things that you can do to help protect against muscle loss and even to build new muscle tissue or build muscle. But I want to back up for a moment and talk about nutrition for cancer risk reduction in general. And sometimes people will ask me, well, why are we talking about this now? Like, if they've already had a diagnosis and been through treatment, like why are we talking about it now? This is important for reducing risk of other cancers, other health conditions, and there's a lot of commonalities between what is recommended for cancer risk reduction and what's recommended for reducing risk of things such as heart disease, diabetes, cognitive decline, obesity. So a lot of the same things apply. So some of the basics, consuming lots of nutrient-dense foods like colorful fruits and vegetables, fiber-rich legumes like beans and lentils, and whole grains. You want to limit or avoid red and processed meats. So I usually tell my patients based on the research and what's shared by the American Cancer Society, red meat, a good goal for that is about once a week. Processed meats, that would be like all deli meats, cured and smoked meats and fish, bacon, sausage, hot dogs, that stuff. When we say avoid, you know, I don't want someone to think that that means they can never ever eat that food again. It's more overall patterns. If somebody is having it once in a great while, or, they're at the airport and the only option is a turkey sandwich, like not a big deal. But if somebody is eating a turkey sandwich 3 or 4 days a week for lunch, that's where we would say, okay, let's some alternatives. You also want to be limiting sugar sweetened beverages and concentrated sweets, and then highly processed foods and highly refined grain products. So I get this question a lot. What is the difference between processed foods and ultra processed foods, or are all processed foods bad? And what's important to know is that there is the processing that foods go through to become edible. Like think of like oats, for example. There's the oat plant, but in order to become like rolled oats or steel cut oats, it needs to be processed in a machine. And that's an example of a healthy processed food. Or frozen blueberries. They have to be frozen. Freezing them is processing them. But when I'm talking about limiting processed foods, that's more like what we will call ultra processed foods. So things where there's a lot of like sugar, sodium, additives. There's not much nutritional value happening. So think of it like, you can be having a bowl of oats with some nuts in it, right? Or you could have a ultra processed granola bar that is made of oats and has a little bit of nuts, but you're also getting sugar and emulsifiers and corn syrup and all this other stuff that's just not offering nutritional value. Um, and then alcohol, limiting alcohol is one of the best things you can do for reducing cancer risk, especially breast cancer. What we tend to tell our patients is that based on the research, it's been shown that if someone is consuming 7 servings of alcohol per week, so a serving per day, so that'd be 5 ounces of wine, 12 ounces of beer, or an ounce to an ounce and a half of a distilled spirit like whiskey or vodka, that's been correlated with about a 10% increase in breast cancer risk. That risk does significantly drop off if someone is having 3 or fewer servings per week. So we encourage our patients who do choose to drink just to keep that number in mind, to keep it to 3 or fewer servings a week. All right, so I get asked a lot about plant-based diets, plant-forward diets. Because, we tell our patients you want to be consuming a plant-forward diet rich in these high-fiber vegetables and fruits and nuts and using healthy fats like olive oil and avocado. But sometimes people hear plant forward and think that that automatically translates to vegan, and that's not necessarily the case. When we say a plant forward diet, what we're talking about, as healthcare providers, is a diet pattern that consists primarily of plants. But you can choose to incorporate some animal products if that serves you. So, for example, what the American Institute for Cancer Research recommends is making about 2/3 of your plate plants. So in this picture over here, you can see we've got a lot of vegetables happening. There's some nuts, a little bit of dried fruit and olives. There's some hummus in there. But then there's a little bit of chicken and half of a hard-boiled egg. So you're getting a lot of plants here, but you're also getting a little bit of that animal protein as well. Also, just we in the context of that plant-forward diet, you still want to be mindful to reduce risk to limit the foods that have been associated with increased disease risk. So, I often will get the question, what about like organic cookies? Like, are those healthier? And like, not really. A cookie is a cookie to a degree. So, somebody can be eating a vegan or plant-forward diet, but they're eating a lot of processed junk that happens to be plant-based. It's still not really giving them the nutrients that they need. So, big picture, what I encourage is eating a balance of protein, healthy fat, we'll get into that, and fiber from complex carbohydrate and similar sources. This helps stabilize blood sugar, which is beneficial for our insulin sensitivity, satiety, so keeping us full, for energy levels, and also for supporting a healthy stress response. I often will tell my patients when our blood sugar is stable, we feel more stable. Our energy is better, our mood is more stable, we feel more resilient against stress. So there's a lot of reasons to be paying attention to balancing your blood sugar, but balancing what's on your plate. So think of it this way. If you're satisfied by your meals and snacks, you're less likely to struggle with compulsive snacking. Um, what I often will see is people who try to restrict their eating they try to eat very little during the daytime because they're trying to be quote unquote good. That's a word I hear very often. By the time nighttime comes, or that's the person who's going to start snacking while they're cooking dinner, maybe finds they overeat at dinner, end up snacking well into the night on things that they've been trying to avoid all day. And one of the best things that that person can do is make sure they're eating enough during the day, eating well-balanced meals and snacks. Um, Other things to keep in mind, if you have enough energy to exercise, you're more likely to do so. So fueling your body well helps you be able to do other things that support weight management goals. And if you're more resilient against stress-induced damage, this can help mitigate inflammation and can also help support a more stable mood, which is great for helping reduce stress eating. So it all fits together. All right, I like formulas because they help us avoid overthinking. So, what I tend to encourage is following what I like to call the overthink proof plate method. So, ideally, for two of your meals, this would be ideal. If that's just not going to work, at least one meal a day. But you want to fill half your plate with non-starchy vegetables. So, a starchy vegetable is like potatoes or corn or peas, and they have their place too, but they're a little more on the starchy side. I recommend going heavy on the non-starchy stuff because you're going to get that filling fiber, which is also great for, um, it also is great for blood sugar balance, good for cholesterol management, estrogen balancing, good for digestive regularity, good for immune system function, all the things. There's a lot going on with fiber. Um, you're going to get vitamins and minerals, you're going to get antioxidants. Also, these foods tend to have a lower calorie load, so it's helpful to be filling up on these foods um, so that they're a little bit less calorie dense, but you're still getting all those nutrients. So fill up on the veggies, the non-starchy stuff, and some non-starchy veggies to highlight in case it's helpful. Things like leafy greens, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, things like eggplant, asparagus, zucchini, cucumbers. Tomatoes, I would also put in the category, even though like cucumbers and zucchini, technically they're a fruit. But nutritionally speaking, the nutrients in there are much more of what we think of when we think of vegetables. You want to also include protein at all your meals. This is one of the biggest things I see people struggle with. If they're not eating enough protein, it is really hard to feel full, and it's really hard to see the results of the work you're doing in the gym. So, some great protein foods when we're talking about a risk reducing diet. So, fish, there's a lot of research on benefits of especially oily fish, so like salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, but even the white fish and seafood like shrimp and lobster and crab, all good stuff. Poultry, also fine. Eggs, fine. I often get a lot of questions about soy and breast cancer. And what I want you guys to know is that soy in its whole form, so like tofu, tempeh, edamame, I put soy milk in this category, that's been shown to not only be safe for breast cancer survivors, but possibly protective. So if you like those foods or are curious about them, you can absolutely eat them. Beans, peas, lentils, those also offer some protein. Um, the red meat, a little bit here and there, like about once a week is okay. Um, I'm not there. I get a lot of questions about the fake meat products, and there's a lot of variation in that category. There are some products that are just not offering much benefit at all. They're just ultra processed. And there are some that they're still more processed, but they've come a long way in terms of like what fats they're using and what sources of protein. So I think they can have their place, but I don't recommend someone make their entire diet based off of fake meat products or meat alternatives, as we might call them sometimes. I get a lot of questions about dairy, and the research is really mixed there. What I will say is that the just blanket recommendation from the ACS is to stick to primarily low-fat dairy. Um, I have my thoughts about that. But what I will say, there is research that shows that fermented dairy, like yogurt, kefir, I would put cultured cottage cheese in this category, so cottage cheese with probiotic bacteria in it, that has been shown to not only be safe, but possibly protective against breast cancer and heart disease, regardless of the fat content. So I'm very comfortable with my patients eating yogurt on the regular. So plain Greek yogurt is an awesome protein source. Cottage cheese is great. But we tend to recommend limiting when it comes to dairy is the super processed stuff that doesn't offer much nutritional value. So like, ice cream and sour cream and cream cheese, and those are more like special occasion foods. So healthy fat, also really important because it helps stabilize blood sugar, helps with nutrient absorption, and certain ones also have other benefits to offer. So, like extra virgin olive oil, for example. I love olive oil so much, I could talk about it for an hour probably. But you're getting heart healthy monounsaturated fatty acids, you're getting antioxidants, especially if you're doing an extra virgin olive oil. Avocado oil is also a great option. That's really high in certain vitamins and minerals, like vitamin E, for example, also a great source of monounsaturated fats. You could use olives. Half of an avocado is a great addition to a meal to add healthy fats. You're also getting fiber with an avocado. You're getting vitamin B6, a lot of good stuff happening there. And then a little bit of starch is fine. I have a lot of patients who are scared of carbs, but we do need some carbohydrate, especially if you're active and you are working towards building muscle. You need protein and carbohydrate to give your body what it needs to build, repair, and retain that muscle. So don't be afraid to add a little sweet potato or a small amount of ideally whole grain, like rice or pasta or little bit of even a small slice of whole grain bread. You guys are terrified of bread, and I feel so horrible about that. Like it's not about just the bread. It's what are we putting on the bread and what else is happening in that meal. So if you love bread and you feel guilty about that, don't feel guilty. But when you're having that bread, have a little bit, but have it with some vegetables, some protein, some healthy fat. So, okay, what about smaller meals? What about snacks? And we can use that formula in these meals as well. So, if it's a smaller meal, and for many people, that does tend to be breakfast, but this could be, maybe lunch is a smaller meal for you, whatever it might be. You still want to have a combo of protein, fat, and fiber. So, if you are in the habit of eating oatmeal for breakfast, it's a very, oats are a very nutrient dense food. To add protein, maybe you add some cottage cheese in there after you finish cooking it, or you add protein powder, or you have a couple of eggs on the side. For healthy fat, you could cook in a tablespoon of ground flax or of chia seeds. You could put a spoonful of peanut butter on top or a little bit of nuts on there. And the fiber is coming from the oats. If you wanted to, you could add a little, like maybe some berries or something. So you're still getting that good balance of nutrients. And snacks, ideally, you want something with fiber and something that provides protein and or fat. So, for example, if you are someone who enjoys fruit as a snack, to get the most nutritional bang for your buck, ideally, I would say pair that fruit with something with protein or fat. So have that apple with some peanut butter or a hard-boiled egg or a piece of cheese. Or, if you are someone who loves chips, like once in a while, like I would say, okay, have a small serving of tortilla chips, but pair it with some guacamole. Or if you enjoy hummus, maybe you mix a little plain Greek yogurt in with your hummus and you eat it with some chopped like sliced veggies or some whole grain crackers. So you're covering those bases and you're going to feel full for longer. And that's going to help you stay satisfied and avoid maybe compulsive snacking or mindless eating. All right, so I won't go too deep into protein because I already kind of did a little bit, but protein is really important for supporting tons of normal body processes. So things like, making blood and hair and connective tissue and enzymes and different antibodies and things that we need for immune function. Plays a role in building and retaining muscle, which we've talked about. Also important for wound healing, so burns, cuts, scrapes, surgical wounds. We talked about blood sugar regulation. Protein and fat, they have a buffering effect on carbohydrates. So, if somebody were to eat a piece of fruit by itself, their body digests it pretty quickly. So their blood sugar goes up quickly and then down quickly. And when our blood sugar goes down quickly, that's when we're kind of start feeling a little hangry, a little kind of looking for something to snack on. But if that person eats that apple with maybe a tablespoon of peanut butter, right? The little bit of protein and that healthy fat in the peanut butter, rather than the blood sugar going up quickly and then down quickly, it goes up more slowly and then down more slowly. So that person feels full and energized for longer. So really helpful for appetite control. Protein also has been shown to support healthy metabolism and fat burning via a thermic effect, meaning that the body uses calories to digest and utilize the nutrients in the food that we eat. So having enough protein is really helpful for that. So there's a few things that can impact someone's protein needs. Because I get asked often, okay, like how much does someone need? So just to know that depending on your activity level, type of activity you do, age, certain medical conditions, that may contribute to having an increase in needs. Our needs tend to go up as we age, again, because of that natural muscle loss that happens. So somebody, a woman in her 50s, especially if she's incorporating some strength training, is going to need more protein than a 25-year-old. So just that's something to know. There are a few things where protein needs may be decreased, but that's mostly what we see with an underlying condition such as chronic kidney disease. Um, and that would include a more specialized diet. Okay, so the magic question is how much protein, or the $1 million question, right? And okay, so the RDA, so the recommended daily allowance for protein for adults, is zero point 0.8 to 1.0 grams per kilogram, which comes out to about 0.36 grams per kilogram. But what I like to point out is that this number is really the bare minimum required to avoid deficiency in people who are sedentary. So it's not necessarily the amount needed for optimal health. So for older adults and women who are postmenopause, that actually bumps up to 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram as that bare minimum. And again, it's because of that loss of muscle mass. But if you are trying to build muscle or maintain muscle, you likely need more protein. So the research is kind of mixed, but most studies recommend around zero point 0.7 to 1 gram per pound or 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of lean mass. And if you're like, okay, what is lean mass? How do I figure that out? The easiest way to do that is to use a scale that measures body composition. And these used to be hard to come by. You used to have to go to a medical practice that used it or a gym that had a machine that measured fat percentage. But today you can actually purchase very easily a smart scale or a scale that measures not just the total weight, but also body fat percentage, muscle mass, bone mass, and water. So it's a lot easier to get that information now. Okay, so I get this question sometimes, which protein sources are best? And we talked a little bit about this, but you do want to go for the leaner proteins, the things that are less processed. And I do get questions about protein supplements like protein powders or drinks. And I think that they can have their place, but ideally you want to be looking for products without artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers, and other additives. And with these, I think they're great as a supplement. If you are having a hard time just covering your bases because you're really busy or it's difficult to get enough. But I don't recommend making them like your only sources of protein. It is good to eat a variety. And healthy fats, I was telling you guys a little bit about, they play a role in nutrient absorption and blood sugar balance. They help us feel full. They also, when we choose the healthier fats, that is also been shown to be beneficial for our heart and our brain and can also protect against inflammation. So, I'm all about the extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil, and things like avocado, olive, nuts and seeds, oily fish. I get questions, okay, what about butter? What about coconut oil? And in moderation, I think that those can have their place for sure, but I don't recommend making those your mainstay. We have so much research on the benefits of the olive oil and the avocado oil. I would say take advantage of that. But if you're making a recipe that it is just not the same without butter, like I'm not going to tell someone that they can't make that food or that, I mean, olive oil, unless it's a specific flavor, like it's never really gonna work in like birthday cake unless it's like a specific like flavor profile. So you have to, again, keeping this approach of the majority of the time you're eating these nutrient dense foods, but then there's a little room for pleasure and flexibility because that helps make it sustainable. So we talked about fiber. This is super important. I get a lot of questions, how much fiber? And you want to aim for about 25 to 35 grams per day, unless otherwise directed by your doctor. So like if you have a digestive condition or are prone to diarrhea, just I would check in with them about that. But this is the general recommendation for healthy adults. And you're going to find fiber in veggies, fruit, like beans, peas, lentils, nuts and seeds, whole grains, avocado also. It's also a little bit in dark chocolate and coffee. So those can help you cover your bases too. I don't recommend trying to get all your fiber in one go, however. I would say spread it out over the course of the day. That way, you're not going to be putting too much demand on your body to digest it. All right, so anti-inflammatory foods. I get a lot of questions about this as well. And just to know that certain foods, especially plant foods, contain anti-inflammatory compounds, meaning that these compounds in these foods have been shown to protect against inflammation that could contribute to disease risk. And this actually can include obesity related inflammation. I think something that gets overlooked sometimes is that obesity is a disease. That's why I'm always really careful to not say that a person is obese. I like to say that they have obesity. We should, address managing obesity the way that we would any other health condition. Anti-inflammatory foods also support weight management via reducing inflammation that could drive insulin resistance, or driving imbalanced levels of leptin and ghrelin, those two hunger hormones that regulate how full or how hungry we feel. Can help protect against elevated cortisol, another factor in weight management issues and resistance to weight loss. So, it's helpful to incorporate a lot of these colorful plant foods that have been shown to have anti-inflammatory benefits. So, again, the olive oil and all the colorful fruits like berries and cherries, leafy greens, all the red, yellow, and orange veggies, beans, nuts and seeds, oily fish, whole grains, and actually herbs and spices have been shown to have a lot of anti-inflammatory benefits. So, cook with lots of flavor. Okay, so what about antioxidants? What are these guys? This is a term a lot of us hear, but may not be super familiar with. And so antioxidant compounds like carotenoids, flavonoids, I'm not even going to try to say this one, phenolic acids found in certain foods. These are all compounds that help fight cell damage. And why that's important is it can help the body be more resilient against stress and injury and help protect against disease. They've also been shown to play a role in changing the microbiome of our gut, so the intestinal microbiome. And this is a newer area of research, but the gut microbiome has been shown to be a potential factor in obesity and other diseases. So, doing what we can to support a healthy gut microbiome is thought to be helpful for reducing risk of obesity and other illnesses. So it's a lot of the same stuff with these anti-inflammatory foods. So again, some themes here, like lots of colorful produce, healthy fats, nuts and seeds. So lean into that stuff. Now, I wanted to touch on carbs because this comes up a lot in my work. And many women think they need to avoid carbs as much as possible, but really we do need some carbohydrate to support just normal, regular body functions like making energy to fuel our brain and body function, storing energy. So, an example of this would be glycogen in our muscles. So, when we exercise, our body utilizes the glycogen that's stored in our muscles to help fuel that activity. So after we exercise, we need to eat carbohydrate to help our body make more glycogen so we can, for our athletic performance next time. And just maintaining normal body function, just day-to-day activities. It's also just worth noting that, many sources of carbohydrate contain fiber, which we need for a wide variety of things. So, okay, I get questions too. How much carbs should someone eat? And the exact amount will vary on factors like activity level, any underlying issues related to, say, glucose metabolism, right? Or certain medications somebody might be on. So I always encourage focus on prioritizing those complex carbs over the refined products. So that's like your brown rice over white rice, or whole grain bread over like white bread, or chickpea-based pasta as opposed to white pasta. And pairing those carbohydrates with protein and or fat. All of that to say, though, I think that we need to be thoughtful about cultural sensitivity when it comes to making diet recommendations. There's this assumption sometimes that in order to be healthy, somebody should be eating like only brown rice and broccoli and chicken, and that's like all that's allowed, right? But, if you come from a culture where white rice is what you eat, what you grew up with, part of what you enjoy when connecting with family members, I'm not going to tell you don't eat white rice. I think What's more important is that remember we did an overthink proof plate. Maybe you have that little bit of white rice, but you're getting tons of fiber from all the vegetables, all those non-starchy vegetables, and you're still having a healthy protein and a healthy fat. And I think that we can apply these concepts to any food culture. So I just wanted to be clear about that. I'm not saying that every person must give up all of the, like the white bread or the white rice. It's really about the balance of nutrients that we have at our meals and snacks. I also wanted to touch on bone health because this does come up with breast cancer survivors. And a lot of you probably have gone through like the DEXA scans, the bone mineral density tests, have talked with your doctors about this. But due to decreasing estrogen levels, whether that's related to just menopause and or use of aromatase inhibitors, that impacts bone mineral density, which can make us more susceptible to fracture. So, in order to protect our bones, what's been shown to be helpful is to consume adequate calcium and vitamin D, to do weight bearing exercise, and to avoid smoking. Also, your doctor may talk to you about possible use of medication to support strong bones. So, that's a conversation to have with them if that is a concern. Also, I know I touched on alcohol, but there are a few ways that alcohol can be problematic for weight management for breast cancer survivors. Like we touched on the fact that it's not helpful for reducing disease risk. It actually increases risk. Also, it negatively impacts sleep. We're going to do a whole section on sleep because it is such a big topic that comes up. But alcohol definitely does not help with sleep, and that can make weight management efforts worse. And regular intake can actually make anxiety worse. A lot of people will drink to relax because there's an initial dulling sensation, but as the body metabolizes that alcohol, there's a rebound effect that actually causes dips in mood regulating brain chemicals like GABA. So that just causes you to feel more anxious and like you need a drink. Also, it's a source of empty calories, so that can add up. What we tell our patients, ideally, you want to limit alcohol to 3 or fewer servings per week, and especially avoid consuming it close to bedtime. All right, I get a lot of questions about intermittent fasting as well. So, should you fast? Maybe, maybe not. We really need more research, but studies show that chrononutrition behavior, so like time restricted eating, might offer some cardiometabolic benefits like weight loss, fat loss, improved blood sugar control, improved lipid metabolism, so like, improved cholesterol numbers. But the results of the studies vary. We definitely need more. What research does suggest, however, is that the benefits associated with fasting, specifically time restricted eating, are largely related to limiting late night eating or eating a lot right before bed. So it's generally recommended to give yourself about 2 to 3 hours before, like after dinner, before you lay down, if possible. Or if you have an early dinner and then you start to get hungry, have like a light snack, but give yourself still about an hour to digest. It's also just important to know if someone is following a more traditional intermittent fasting pattern. Maybe they have their eating window of, X many hours, whether it's, their eating window is 8 hours or 12 hours. What you eat in that window still matters. There's no magic number of hours that a person should fast. Again, like we need more research, and also every body is different. So you really have to pay attention to what feels right for you. Something that I have seen quite a bit in my work is that fasting for too long, it may actually put stress on the body, slowing metabolism. I've definitely worked with women who have been fasting for like they'll have a very short eating window. And one, it can lead to overeating during that window. It can lead to impulsive snacking kind of outside of that window. But also the body is kind of stressed out because it's thinking, oh gosh, like we might not have food for a long time, so we better like slow this metabolism down. Um, Also, it's really hard to hit your protein targets if you're not eating for a long enough period of time. So, what I often will share with my patients is that if you're curious about fasting and to see how it feels, consider fasting for 12 hours overnight to see if that feels like a good fit for you. And if that feels really good and you want to explore a little bit, for some, Narrowing their eating window to have more of a 14 or 16-hour fast might feel great, but for others, it might feel too restrictive, leading to hunger and cravings and overeating at meals. So pay attention to your body, pay attention to your mindset and how behaviors play out. And when thinking about, that fasting and or eating window, think about your lifestyle and what makes the most sense for you. But that said, that there are definitely some people who I do not recommend fasting. So some contraindications, obviously eating disorder, pregnancy and lactation, people with type 1 diabetes who are on insulin, and children, especially children under 18 years of age. Also, if you're on a medication that decreases blood sugar, like metformin, for example, talk to your doctor about whether fasting will be appropriate for you. And we're not going to get into it today. There's a whole next lecture on weight loss drugs, but I would also be mindful with some of the weight loss medications. I don't necessarily recommend um, diving right into intermittent fasting with those. You definitely want to talk with your doctor about the optimal routine for you. Okay, we couldn't talk about nutrition without talking about navigating online nutrition information. I joke that like 99% of my job feels like myth busting some days. I have been in this field for about 15 years, and if someone had told me when I was a student how much of my career would be spent defending bananas, I don't know what I would have thought. But I just want to share that there is an overwhelming amount of nutrition information available online. It is like the Wild West of health info, right? It is like there is so much out there. It is wildly unregulated, and it can be really hard sometimes to tell what's credible and what's not. So I always encourage, okay, consider the source. When you're looking at this information, ask yourself, is the author credentialed in what they are talking about? Or does the resource, maybe an article you're reading, include insight from credentialed experts and or research studies? So you want to look for that credibility. Is the resource intended for people with your specific health concern, and or do the quoted experts work with people like you who have your concerns? That's another clue that, okay, maybe if they do, if they are serving an audience who has things in common with you, then that might be applicable to you. But if not, like if somebody is, I don't know, like, if you are looking at a study that was done in men, right? It might not be applicable to your health concerns. Um, Another thing I always keep in mind, and this comes up a lot, especially in social media, like if you're looking at a social media post, right, and someone is talking about, say, like some supplement that they think everyone should be on, are they selling that supplement? Are they getting money for talking about that thing? So that's also a clue, just to kind of take a little step back and think, okay, maybe, that might not be the right thing. And sometimes we do see credentialed experts who do have partnerships with, specific brands, supplements. There's something they really love that they are receiving money for. But that's where you do want to do that detective work to consider, okay, is there a credentialed expert involved? Do they help people who have your concerns? And, is this like actual advice or just opinion or just something that someone is doing for money? Okay, so I don't know how many of you on here, I can't see your all your names, but working with a dietitian, some of you I know, some of you I might not know yet, but when it comes to working with a provider, you do want to look for someone who is licensed. Um, so there's a lot, to keep going on the online health, there's a lot of advice out there. And a lot of that advice is coming from people who are not credentialed experts, who may be sharing things that are not appropriate for everybody. So I do encourage, when possible, working with a registered dietitian who can help you come up with an individualized plan to support your goals. So what the kind of work that you'll do with a dietitian, they'll generally ask you about your health history, your goals, current eating habits, and your lifestyle. They'll also provide diet education and recommendations for supplement use if appropriate, and offer support and accountability. It's not just about someone telling you what to do, it's about helping you stay consistent with healthy habits, even when life gets real, and helping you come up with strategies to cope if there are barriers that are making it challenging for you to stick with your goals. So, I'm going to open this up for questions. If you guys are not already connected with us on Instagram, we are at Valley Breast Center, all one word. So we post educational content, we do some live video classes and more. So if you are not already following us, we would love to see you. And if you don't use Instagram, no worries. That's it's I always joke it's one of the not helpful for mental health, but if you're already on there, so are we. So I wanted to see if anybody has had questions about what we've been talking about tonight. And you can pop that in the chat. I didn't share that, but okay. So yeah, you can raise your hand if you would like, if you prefer. Okay, I see a question, is beef broth okay? That's a great question. And we don't have much data to really say one way or the other. So what I tell my patients is that in moderation, I'm okay with it. I would ideally look for something from like a small amount. But I would say more often I'd recommend using like chicken broth or like organic chicken broth or vegetable broth. But a little beef broth here and there, I'm not super worried about. Okay, I see Rhonda. Um, Rhonda, do you mean controversy about tofu? Yeah, so this is something that I've seen perpetuated like this. So a long time ago, like 20 plus years ago, the recommendation was to limit soy. The thinking was that okay, so there are these plant compounds called phytoestrogens, and they're called that because when we look at the cell structure under a microscope, it looks similar to estrogen, but it is not the same compound as human estrogen. And in fact, foods that are high in phytoestrogens, so soy is just one example, ground like flax seeds are another. Um, that these phytoestrogens actually seem to have a protective effect. And in the time since then, and a lot of those recommendations also were based on animal studies, but we've had a lot of research in humans. So different types of studies, different populations. So people who were eating soy their whole life, people who didn't start eating soy till they were diagnosed with breast cancer, a lot of different study designs consistently showed that soy in its whole form, so like tofu, tempeh, edamame, miso, soy milk, not only safe but possibly protective at doses of like 2 to 3 servings per day. So at that point, you'd have to be like getting sick of it, right? The stuff that we tell people to avoid is soy supplements. So the specific phytoestrogen in soy is called isoflavone. And we just don't have the data to show if taking a super concentrated supplement is too much of a good thing. So we tell our patients as a food that you're eating, here and there, absolutely fine, might offer some benefit, but we don't recommend doing soy supplements. So I hope that that clears it up. Like with soy, or tofu, I will often recommend going for like organic, non-GMO, but big picture, when we're just talking about soy as a category, not something that I tell people to worry about for breast cancer. All right, I got a question about, can I utilize the services of a Valley dietitian if I wasn't treated at Valley? So, we do have a program that is just for Valley patients, but Valley also has a nutrition department. So that I believe you can book with them as a new patient. So that would be I don't have their phone number off the top of my head, but if you go to the Valley website, so valleyhealth.com, the nutrition department page, you'll find their contact information. So that's a if you're looking for just general nutrition with a provider at Valley. So yeah, great question. All right, I see a question asking, is uncured bacon still a processed meat to be avoided? That is an excellent question. Thank you for asking that, because so many people want to know that, and it's confusing, right? When it comes to processed meat, the risk is more so in the processing. And even with the uncured things, a lot of the risk happens during the digestion process. So what's happening with processed meat is, when somebody eats it, there are different cellular, different molecular reactions that happen in the body, and some of these can result in the formation of potentially carcinogenic compounds. So, if someone is eating it just once in a while, I'm not super concerned. But if someone is regularly eating uncured bacon because, someone on Instagram said it was healthier and they could eat it every day, I would be concerned about that because there is more opportunity for those chemical reactions to happen and potentially lead to carcinogenic compounds forming in the body. So, yeah, that is a great question. Thank you for asking that. I hope that clears that up. And this is consistent with like other processed meats too. So, like, I get asked often, is turkey sausage or turkey bacon healthier? Or what about deli turkey if it's organic? And kind of processed meat is kind of all the same. And like, I think when you are going to make the decision to have it, you should have the type that you love and will be most satisfied with. So rather than trying to look for a healthier version. I hope that that's helpful because I know there's a lot of confusion around that. Oh, if anybody is looking for the nutrition department number, Kathy popped it in the chat box, but that is 201-634-5371. So that is the number for the nutrition department. All right. Sorry, I drink water. I've been talking. Wow, you guys have been a really wonderful crowd. I really appreciate your questions. All right, I see a question asking about whole wheat English muffins with natural flavoring, and is that better than regular white ones? Yeah, it's a good question. I think if someone is trying to decide between like two English muffins in the store, I would really go for the one that is higher in fiber, ideally less processed ingredients. So my very favorite, I have no relationship with this brand at all, but I do tend to recommend if possible, the Ezekiel English muffins or the Food for Life, I think is the official brand name, that you're going to find in the freezer section. And they're frozen because they don't have preservatives, so they need to stay frozen to like stay fresh. So those are like my absolute favorite, but otherwise, I think a whole grain version, ideally with the least amount of additives would be great. Um, but once in a great while, I'm not against someone having like a regular white English muffin, but I would love to see them incorporate some fiber and protein and healthy fat into their meal. I also got saw a question, is rotisserie chicken better than deli meat? I generally would say so. You're still gonna run into a lot of sodium. You know, some like, it's not you may find like some additives that are not ideal, but it is less processed. So technically I would be more likely to recommend that than I would deli meat. That's a really great question. Thank you for asking that. Anything else? And we have just a few more minutes. Okay. I see this. All right. Oh, the $1 million question about seed oils. Okay. Yeah, this is a big one that's coming up in the media these days is, do seed oils cause inflammation? And well, I think that it's tricky, right? Because I don't want to say that there's nothing to that claim, but I think that the way that it's being discussed in the media, it's becoming there's a lot of fear mongering and just shaming happening. And when it comes to the seed oil, so that would be like vegetable oil, canola oil, just to name a few. Um, what the reason that these are people are saying that they cause inflammation is their profile of omega-6 fatty acid to omega-3 fatty acid is very high. And when we take in too much omega-6, a type of fat, that has been associated with higher levels of inflammation in the body potentially. Um, so if someone is just here and there having, like maybe they buy a particular hummus that has canola oil in it, or they go out to dinner once in a while where they're cooking in vegetable oil, like I'm not really worried about that. But if the only source of fat in someone's diet is, they're using canola oil for everything, they're eating a ton of restaurant food, they're not eating any food sources of omega-3s like oily fish or like chia seeds or flax, then I think there's something to talk about there. But the way that I like to look at this is we have so much research on the health benefits of extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil. Why not take advantage of that and make those your primary cooking oils? And that way, if you do have some seed oils here or there, it's not a big deal. Um, I think a lot of what like what the with social media, and media in general, a lot of the way that these articles and posts are created is that the creators or the editorial staff, or they see that there are certain topics, certain keywords that are trending and getting clicks and likes and engagement, and so therefore these outlets or these creators rush to put out content on these topics, and then the algorithm picks up on it and it just keeps going. So just to keep that in mind, a lot of this stuff is very sensationalized, but I think big picture, lean into the healthy fats that we definitely have the research showing the health benefits of. And that way you can relax a little bit about the seed oils. So you want to crowd out the potentially questionable stuff with stuff that offers benefits, is how I like to approach that. So I hope that's helpful. Right, I think we have time for one more question. Um, You guys have brought some really thoughtful questions, so thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your time and your energy and your enthusiasm. Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions, I think we'll call it a night. Thank you for sharing some of your Tuesday evening with me. This is being recorded, so this will be accessible um, at a later date. So, again, thank you for being here. And I am really happy to hear that you found this helpful. Thank you all so, so much. All right. Well, have a wonderful evening, everyone, and we will talk soon.